Coming up on today's episode of the Salesman Podcast.
What's discovered right now is that there's a significant number of people disjointed and many times with competing priorities that are in the decisioning. So it's more confusing now than ever before. So yes, there's many more stakeholders. And it's important for us to know who they are and how to categorize them.
Hello, Sales Nation. I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman Podcast, the world's most listened to B2B sales show. If you haven't already, make sure to click subscribe. And with that, let's meet today's guest.
I'm Joe Morone, speaker, trainer, and author of the Smart Sales Methods. You can find me on worldleadersales.com.
On this episode of the show, the legend that is Joe, we're diving into business cases and a bunch of other things as well, but specifically how we can build a business case that it's very difficult to say no to. It includes customized messages for each of the stakeholders, each of their priorities. Essentially, it leads to a relative value calculation at the end. It makes total sense. If you're in B2B sales, there's a ton of value in this episode for you. And so let's jump right into it. In a world where speed seems to be of increasing importance and there's all kinds of automation tools and we're being pushed to just spam, why do we perhaps, I'm preempting this, perhaps need to sometimes take a little bit of time to customize our messaging to our buyers?
Sure, Will. So let's just take one step back and say that if you looked at all the pipelines in all the B2B companies in the world, and you were to ask yourself three simple questions: who is the final approver? Who is the business level decision maker? What's the business case? And why do they need to do this now? What you would find that most pipelines are pipe dreams. So the need to really get to the real decision makers, and I'll talk about the business, the user, and the financial level decision makers, and co-develop the business case with them, facilitate that process, and create the need to drive for priority is the number one sales skill today. It is everything in sales. We have to be better as a community at better talking to the right level decision makers, creating the business case, and facilitating the decisioning process instead of being subjected to it. So that was a mouthful.
Well, right, we'll run through each of these. I'm jotting it down as we go through, Joe. We'll run through each of these. But something that immediately strikes me, it seems that most of us assume that the quote-unquote decision maker is one individual person. Can it be multiple people? Should it be multiple people? Are we doing it wrong if there's only one person that we're relying on at the end of the day?
I think the Challenger customer really talked about it beautifully. I think that Selling to Vito, Anthony Pernell spoke about it beautifully. If you look at the Holden principles, power-based selling, what's discovered right now is that there's a significant number of people disjointed and many times with competing priorities that are in the decisioning. So it's more confusing now than ever before. So yes, there's many more stakeholders. And it's important for us to know who they are and how to categorize them.
Okay, so let's skip towards the end of the selling process, just because we can cover kind of 15 hours on uncovering the decision makers at the top of it. So let's assume that we know there are multiple decision makers. We understand the selling principles behind getting them all on board and perhaps the politics of things. How does a business case need to reflect the fact that there are multiple decision makers? Because I know for myself, I don't really even do business cases. I tend to just throw out a proposal and then hopefully I hear back from the brand or the individual that I've sent it to within the next couple of weeks, otherwise I'm panicking. How do we build a legitimate business case, and how do we kind of reflect the fact that there's so many more buyers within there's so many more buyer needs that need to be reflected in the business case than perhaps ever before?
Sure. So I'll answer that. I've got two graphics behind me. Can you see them? So this one here represents the business, the user, and the financial level stakeholders. So let's say that you're selling a technology product, a medical device, or something like that to an OEM. The business level decision maker is going to be the person that has profit and loss responsibility for that product or program that you're looking to enhance, right? And they're going to want to understand one of five things: how you can better enable that customer to improve their sales, market penetration, account penetration, bring in more revenue. How you can help them compress cycle time of developing their product. Mm-hmm. Number two, Number 3 is how you can help them improve first-time quality of that product without engineering in waste. Number 4 is how you can enable them or help them meet compliance, regulatory, political, social compliance. And the bottom line is the bottom line, how you can enable them to be more profitable with that product. So the business case for the product manager, the P&L owner of that product, would be one of those 5 business objectives. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And one thing on this, because I feel like I overcomplicate everything here. Is it as simple? Is it as simple as we need to focus on one of those, or is there likely to be a mix of them? Or I guess another way of putting it, if there is a mix of them that we are focusing on, is that because we don't really know the true needs of the individual?
Listen, we should know our industry, right? Good salespeople understand their products. Great salespeople understand the customer they're selling to. But the 1%ers, they understand how their product or services impact the entire industry that they're selling to. So they should have a hypothesis of one or all of those 5 business objectives. They should know it better than the customer. We shouldn't be asking the customer what keeps them up at night. We should know what their peers, their competitors, their contemporaries are doing, and we should teach that customer how to make those improvements. So it's any combination of those 5 business objectives for the business level decision maker. But we're only 1/3 there.
Okay, let's run through the next couple, and I'm as I said, I'm jotting down things here, Joe, because I feel like this is a mega diagram that if you don't have, we'll build some kind of infographic around, because I think this would be really useful to just even have on the wall in the office.
Yes, I'd love to do that with you, Will. So the next step is what we'll call the technical user, the functional user. And the things that they're going to be concerned with is functionality, usability, reliability, scalability, and obsolescence. But what they're most concerned is disruption. Will this disrupt status quo? Will I lose control of my domain? So we've got to really talk about the idea of what risks or concerns, if we did implement this new program or product, would disrupt them. So understanding that and being able to talk to the the user level decision maker around functionality, usability, reliability, scalability, and most important, disruption. Let's not disrupt what they need to do.
Got it. That makes
so
sense.
It's the second of 3 level decision makers.
Cool. And let's bring it home with the third.
Sure. Procurement. And I know that topic on this call is one that scares the daylights out of her.
I felt a little bit ill in my stomach as you said that word then.
We all do. But when we truly understand, and I've been over the last 2 years, I've been researching with the highest world level consultants to the procurement organizations, and we're learning some new things about them. So when we're working with procurement, we really want to talk about the idea of, first off, how to become a qualified supplier, right? What that means. There's 10 criteria there, but also terms and conditions, and then, as we all know it, price. But it's not just price any longer. Procurement departments are getting much more sophisticated than ever before. And we really have to understand the difference between direct procurement, indirect procurement, and what levels in the procurement organization we're interfacing with. It's a class in of itself. It's a conversation in of itself that we can no longer avoid these people. We have to include them in the decisioning process.
What happens when we do avoid them? And having been in that position myself, selling to the NHS here in the UK, 9 times out of 10, I'd try and get the surgeon on board. I'd try and get the theatre manager and staff on board, and I'd send them over to procurement and let them do their business, because they could be a lot probably less polite than what I could be and get away with it and get the deal done. So having been in the scenario where then procurement obviously just kicks everyone out and tells them that it's not happening, what's the process that's going on behind the scenes that makes procurement increasingly important for a large B2B size deal?
Sure. So what procurement departments are starting to understand today is that for every dollar saved in procurement, it's worth $24 of revenue in an organization. So procurement organizations are becoming much more strategic, right? We've got procurement agents now earning over $1 million a year at some of the large organizations. So they are getting closer and closer to the strategy of the organization. In 3 to 5 years from now, they're going to be at the table with the business, the user, and financial level stakeholders. So let's get used to it now. Let's get good at this right now.
This is a weird question for a sales podcast. I assume procurement agents are commissioned, especially if they're on $1 million a year. They're commissioned on saving costs or increasing efficiencies or whatever it is. Is there a link then between sales and procurement? As in, should this podcast be the sales and procurement podcast because people are going to be going from one kind of industry to the next and going back and forth throughout their careers?
It's interesting. The answer is yes. I've spoken now to 3 world-level procurement consultants, Dr. Robert Hanfield, Arjun Van Weel, and Amar Ghanami. And all 3 of them have read my book and are reading sales books now. And what they're saying is that sales and strategic sourcing are both sides of the same coin, right? How to improve the business results, mitigate risks, and do it at fair market pricing is something that good salespeople and good procurement people should all be on the same page for.
Got it. Well, that's probably a topic for another time, because I feel like we could totally derail everything
Sure,
we're talking about here with that. But perhaps we'll have you on in the future, even one of those individuals, to get into this a bit deeper. But bringing it back to the business case for a second, Joe. So all of that makes logical sense, that there are these stakeholders, they have these priorities, and our product or service, or even the outcome of the product or service, the results need to align with that for us to communicate and have a great conversation. How does this translate to a business case? Either a physical document or a document that's been sent over via PDF. Do we need to run through each one of these, or perhaps do we have 3 different business cases or subsections of the business case for each of these stakeholders? What does it look like kind of written on paper, and then perhaps we can reverse engineer the perfect business case later on?
I love this case, Will. Take a look at the formula behind me. We call it the relative value formula, or the business case. So relative value equals the business result, right? How will enable this customer to make money, save money, improve their product quality, as I said earlier, plus RM. And RM stands for risk mitigation. How have we helped the customer through the risk? Contractual risk, schedule risk, performance risk, reliability risk, and most importantly, the risk of obsolescence. And the last part of the formula is FMP, stands for fair market price, right? The fair market price is the price that an educated buyer buys from an educated seller over time, unpressured. So when we look at this formula, we can handwrite this on the whiteboard of a new customer. We can use it internally for evaluating proposals. We could say to the board of directors that has to approve our program, let's make sure that we're co-creating relative value together. Let's make sure we've got a business result, that we're mitigating the risk, and we're doing it at fair market price. Why shouldn't we do business?
That makes sense. How does this, say that we're going to do that? We're going to pitch a formula, and perhaps we kind of not dumb it down, but we make it more palatable. I love talking. I was just saying before we record, I love talking formulas and the academic side of business, but other people, perhaps you need to communicate with them differently if they're a visual thinker, whatever it is. So with that said, can we put numbers into this? So we know the business result. Hopefully, if we're going to save X, we're going to reduce Y, we're going to do whatever it is. We know the fair market price, because the market will somewhat dictate that, and we can quantify that, whether it's good or bad for us, and whether we want to quantify it is probably another conversation. Can we then throw in a number for the risk management element of this? Is that quantifiable?
Sure, it is. It absolutely is, right? If we look at the first element of risk management is contractual terms and conditions, right? So that's payment terms, that's pricing, that's warranty, those kinds of things. So very quantifiable, very easy to process in the neocortex. It's there. The second one is schedule obtainment, delivery dates, and performance. We can attach a date to it. The third one is performance measures. How do we measure performance? If we're selling a new electronic microscope or a scientific microscope, how many specimens can it test? How much reimbursement can it drive for the hospital? Right. So the next one is reliability. What are the reliability statistics? And then obsolescence. So yes, we have to quantify it. We must quantify it.
And again, going back to the business case, then, is this a list of all these things on a page with not necessarily a price, but like dates and times and kind of ways to clarify? Is that what we're looking for here?
You bet. Think about, we call it a SMART proposal, and that is, in a proposal, one page, okay, printed double-sided, but it talks about the business results, the alternate strategies considered, risk mitigation plan, the solution overview. That's page 1. So that's the relative value. Page 2 is the risk mitigation. And we actually use a work breakdown structure to show all the risks of how we work through them and the customer acceptance criteria, the pricing, and then on the bottom quarter of the second page is the unique qualifiers, why we're uniquely qualified. And the last part is the skills, experience, and accomplishments of the team doing the work. So we can use this relative value equation, combining it into a smart proposal, one page double-sided. You can present it in about 5 to 7 minutes, and we can present it to what I call the buff, the business, the user, and the financial level stakeholders, and now we can prosecute business cases and win more business.
This seems like an incredible tool if there's any pushback, anyone wants to negotiate. It seems very simple with an equation to say, well, you want it cheaper, so we'll just change these terms here. And again, if it's on 1 or 2 pages, it can literally be done kind of there. There's no contract, so we'll have to pull this contract and we'll have to pull this. And historically, we've done X, Y, Z. It seems like we can just, even if there was an app that we could all stare at or something like that, we could just see it all, or a spreadsheet. We could see it all just kind of amalgamate and come up with a different, response to the equation, and we can verbalize that as opposed to like a score or something at the end of it, perhaps. But this seems like a great negotiating tool. Can we be using it for that as well?
Yes. Take a look at the relative value equation, and then when we get pushback, read it in reverse order, right? The customer's just focused on price, not fair market price. So that's when we compare what we're doing with the customer, we can say, okay, what risks have we assumed? What risk have we mitigated, right? It's a lower price. Why is it a lower price? Is it in the terms and conditions? Is it in schedule guarantee? Is it in performance? Is it in reliability? Or are they buying something that's going to obsolesce out? Is the business result there? Is there relative value? So the reality is, going in and presenting it, we can present the relative value equation beautifully to win the business. And when we get the 3 most common objections, right? Price, time, and competition, we can reverse engineer that formula and handle it beautifully and win our fair share.
Okay, so this makes total sense to me, and I'm a logical thinker. If you came to me, Joe, with a proposal like this or a business case for whatever it is, you'd be taking my money because I'd be like, it makes total sense. There's no reason not to. And in a large scale B2B sale, if there's multiple stakeholders, if there is if the logic seems to work in negotiations like that, and everyone can agree, but the problem that, or not problem, something that I feel like potentially is missing, and hopefully you can fill this in for us, is the emotional side of selling here, because I feel like we know that we make kind of emotional decisions, then justify things with logic after the fact, perhaps. And I know that if we're sat in a room of people, it's one thing to go into a room with a double-sided piece of paper and say, this all makes total sense, let's do it. And then it's another thing when Barry starts complaining about Harry, and then Sally's dog died in the morning, and so she's upset and not going to seal the deal with anything, no matter how logical it is. How does all this translate to the real world of being sat in front of a group of board members and presenting it? Does emotion factor into this, or can we kind of eliminate that with a strategy?
Listen, I'm a believer of the triune brain, right? So the idea of the neocortex, the limbic system, where the emotions are, but we totally forgot the lizard brain, right? The amygdala, survival instinct. So your question is about emotions, right? And the 8 human emotions, right? Fear, anger, joy, ecstasy, the others, right? Vigilance, those. When we start and we talk about the business objectives that we're trying to accomplish, right? And then we address the risks or the concerns and the disruptions. And then we ask each person a simple question of, why are we doing this now? And why should we wait? When we ask that product manager who's got a product that's aging out, that's losing business, and we ask, why are we doing this now? And why should we wait? Why now? And that person comes back to say, my product that I have P&L responsibility has lost 23% of revenue this year, and we're going to lose. That's fear. That's emotion. So when we ask the question, why now? and what are the ramifications of delaying or waiting, that triggers in the emotions. But when we also talk to them and we say, we work with key product managers like yours, helping them to penetrate new markets, win more sales, compress development cycle times, and bring more profit to your organization, we're also talking to the amygdala, their survival instinct. And then when we say, let's get together to determine feasibility, potential return, and if we're the right fit, now we're touching the neocortex. So let's sell all the powers, not just one or two of them.
That makes total sense. One thing here, right, that you mentioned it earlier on, which I think makes, again, logical sense, but I feel like if I was doing this, I'd probably be not too humble because I've got a massive ego, but I'd feel awkward kind of writing this down on paper, would be our unique qualifiers. Then you touched on kind of team attributes and that afterwards as well. What would be an example of a unique qualifier for, my background is medical device sales, so perhaps a medical device company or something like that?
Sure. There's 5 or 6 unique qualifiers, right, that all people subscribe to. So the first unique qualifier is the product superiority and alignment to the business. The second unique qualifier is customization to need, what you've done to customize this product to meet the customer's needs. The third one is the ability to meet a delivery timeline. This has to be implemented before Q2, so this new product release comes out. This new school security system has to go in before students return back to school. So number 3 is schedule obtainment. Number 4 is performance, right? And number 5 is vertical integration, meeting the vertical. And number 6 is technology integration, fitting in with the back-end systems.
How does that look on, I'm just trying to visualize this, and perhaps we can put together an example and put it in the show notes, which will make it easier for the audience and myself, kind of after the fact. But is this a series of, and maybe I'm drilling too far into the details here, but is this a series of bullet points of we have great vertical integration, we do X, Y, Z, we do 1, 2, 3? How does that look like on a page?
It looks like the bottom quarter of the second page only, and there are 1 or 2 sentences each.
Got it.
The customer is more concerned with you meeting their business objectives and improving. I'll say this, and I'll use the slogan that I always use. Be 100% focused on your customer's competitive advantage, and don't worry about your competitive advantage. If you can enable them to improve their competitive advantage, and then you're describing unique qualifiers, you're going to win your fair share. Rarely is that customer evaluating feature function versus feature function. Really what they're looking for is relative value. Is there a business return? Has that sales team mitigated the risk? And am I buying it at fair market price? Think like the buyer, not the seller.
Got it. And that's what I was hesitant on then, of if I'm writing, me with my incredibly massive ego and a massive head that I struggle to walk through doors with, if I'm writing all these things out, is it a paragraph? Because then that's super off-putting. No one's actually going to read it, are they? They're just going to skim over it. But a few sentences makes total sense. So,
well, can I just contradict you for one point?
Of course you can.
The ego thing. Listen, you're providing a service for all B2B salespeople. It's an incredible service that you're providing for us, but also as you get us better, we're going to drive better technology to organizations to make the world a safer and more prosperous place. You're doing incredible work for us, Will. I appreciate it very much. No ego.
You're not helping with my ego here. It's inflating as we go through the call, Joe. I appreciate that, mate. And the audience kind of tagging along, and they appreciate the fact that
hey, we're on a
making a
sales
difference,
call, right?
Yeah, of course. So, okay, right, Joe. With that, then, so that's the end of the well, not the end of the process. Let's carry on towards the end of the process. Then, what does this look like in the meeting? We give everyone this piece of paper, we put it on the screen, whatever it is, we present it, we don't need to cover that. How do we get agreement on the end of it? Is it literally a case of saying, hey, this makes total sense. Is there any reason why we wouldn't do the deal? Is this makes total sense? Would you like to move forward with it? Is it as simple as that at this point? Or are there any kind of weird closing techniques we need to kind of throw down the pipeline?
Well, I think let me say this. I've put about 112,000 hours into this answer and about 30 years of studying. So I've looked high and low for sales trainers and books to really to answer this question. So I'm going to give it to you Very, very straightforward. It's on page 78 in my book, by the way, but no need to push. Let's say that you're considering, and I've got some notes here, but let's say that you're working with a large corporation and you're going to consider outsourcing their entire or part of their IT function, right? So you're going to open up with a conversation saying, the objective here is for ABC company to focus more time on their product development and supporting their customers and virtually no time supporting their end users and their IT systems. The objective is to enable you to improve your products and services while outsourcing the core. So we'll say there's 3 C's there. There's focusing on your core, there's meeting operational compliance, and the third one is cost management and cost reduction. If we're all on the same page that this is the objective, let's get together to determine feasibility, potential return, and if we have the right fit. In order to do this, we need to have the operations leader, the P&L owner, to talk about how this will improve the operation, exactly what that looks like. Let's have the IT organization to talk about functionality, usability, reliability, and scalability, and most important, not to disrupt your current system. Let's get procurement involved to discuss terms, conditions, vendorship, and all those pieces. We can put together a 1 to 2 hour meeting. There's 11 questions that we would ask. From that, we can come straight to a proposal, smart proposal, that's decisionable, and we can compress this sales cycle from the traditional 18 months to 1 or 2 weeks. That's the objective of selling smarter, to be able to really name the benchmark that we're all working towards and identify the key decision makers that you want to bring into the process, not asking them who they think they are. We do this for a living. We should know that. So you're identifying the key decision makers that you believe should be in the process, what questions you're going to ask, when the proposal will be developed, and schedule the proposal meeting. That is a method. That's not a skill set. That's a method.
So I'm clear on this. Is the smart proposal then built up in real time with the stakeholders in the room, or do we go in with a hypothesis and then you mentioned 11 questions there? Perhaps we can touch on that a little bit further. But are we going in with a hypothesis and then reverse engineering the best solution and customizing it for them in real time?
We're always starting off with a benchmark or a utopia statement, but we're going to say to the customer, listen, that's under ideal circumstances. Let's talk about reality of how and if this can work in your organization. And we want to co-create the business case together or disqualify it. But let's work together to build it together. And also, let's be straightforward with each other. At any time when either party believes we don't have the right fit, let's be the first one to tell the customer that.
Got it. Okay. And perhaps final thing to wrap up here, Joe, of this hopefully this will be common sense for a lot of the audience. However, some of the new sales reps will listen to this and go, this is incredible. I'm going to do it right now. And they're going to send a cold email to the CMO of Microsoft and say, hey, let's sit down with 3 of your board executives and go through these kind of three sections. Here's the criteria. And of course, they're not going to get a reply. When does all this happen in the sales process? Is this the first outreach to get a meeting, to get a phone call? Then we kind of tee this up and frame it up that this is our process? Or again, at the beginning of the sales cycle, how do we end up in this scenario with these 3 people? Because clearly the time is expensive. There's going to be perhaps politics to get everyone in the room. How do we reverse engineer this seemingly incredible meeting?
Beautiful question. Great question. So let's go down the path of first off, that message that we're talking about is all over our website. It's our landing page. It's what we blog about. It's what we network about. It's what we do webinars about, seminars. It's what we write about. It's not that we have a value proposition. It's that sales team is the value proposition. They are that message. So there's a number of ways to reach a customer, right? There's the traditional voicemail, in-mail, phone call. All of those things, they're used early, often, and all the time. So any way that you can get the meeting, it's done that way.
Sure.
But I can tell you that sending an email, following up by a phone call, if you listen to Anthony Parinello selling to VITO, his process hasn't changed. That's still a workable process. I like to integrate marketing, sales, social, all of it into one cohesive message right? We're always saying to a customer that we're going to improve tolerance time and total cost of your production environment, or we're going to make these levels of improvements. And however that conversation is, whoever it's with, whether it's at the executive level, the business level, the user, or the financial level, all we're doing is asking and recommending how to bring the other two stakeholders in. So even if it's at the technical level, we're still always focusing on bringing the other two in whatever message that is. We call that the 5x1. The first 5 seconds of the first minute, we're getting to the point of what the business objective is, how to stimulate and get them emotionally involved, and suggest a course forward for doing what I love is proper due diligence. Let's get together to do proper due diligence, whether this is feasible, if there's a return, and if we're the right fit.
So some of the audience will be going, that makes total sense. I'm going to implement this now, especially the sales leaders that listen. They can reverse some of this into their marketing and other strategies as well. But for the individual sales professionals listening, the quota carrying person in the trenches, can they do anything with perhaps their LinkedIn profile, if they have their own website, whatever it is? Can they do anything to set themselves up, to frame themselves up as, I'm not a pesky salesperson. I am, for want of a better word, hopefully there might be a better word to describe this, but I'm a genuine consultant. We have a methodology. We have a process to getting to the perfect business case. How do they brand themselves as someone who isn't just there to hound people on the phone?
It's a great question, Will. First off, we have to start looking at ourselves as business leaders, right? Business advisors, trusted advisors, all those scenarios. Let's get right down to it. We're business leaders. We're going to lead other businesses in improving their business results. I think the name of our job tells what we do best. B2B technology sales, business to business technology sales. That means we're a business person talking to another business person about technology, then sales. So in our LinkedIn profile, we want to have our name and what markets we serve and how we help them. So we want to have our name. We want to talk about the types of goals and problems we help customers get through, and talk about that in the shared space. When we're using LinkedIn, so in our LinkedIn profile, right below our picture, first off, let's make sure we've got a very professional picture. We're not standing there with our cat or our dog or the fish that we caught last week, but we've got a professional look, and that look aligns to the industry that we're working towards. At the space below, you can talk about the problems, and you can really talk about the end result of what you do. So if you're in medical devices and you're selling to OEMs, you're talking about improving medical device market penetration and profitability. And that goes in the line below you. And then in that free space is really where you're using what we call your 5x1. How you're helping what kinds of customers. So it can go just like this. Ready? We work with program managers and directors of research and development within medical device organizations to help them improve their market penetration, reduce cycle time, meet FDA approvals, and become more profitable. That's in the line. The second line is, if this is of interest, let's get together. We have a fit assessment to determine feasibility, potential return, and if we're the right fit. So you're actually selling your process and your business result in your LinkedIn profile. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And one final thing on this. So the answer may be spending more time with high-level salespeople. Another answer might be listen to more of the podcast. It might be reading books, such as yours, Joe. But how do we start to be able to speak like a business leader and use the vocabulary like you're using far better than what I do on the show of, talking about strategic alignment rather than saying, oh, we want to partner with you and things like that, which might be, it just comes across as more, there's a fine line here between being a drone and being, someone, a human who is a professional, right? So I'm conscious of that. But how do we learn this vocabulary, this business acumen? How do we ingrain all of this into us at a deep level so that we can perhaps have these conversations in the first place?
Yes. So, Will, there's 448 hours in 1 month. If you slept 8 hours and you spent the other 16 doing research, there's 448 hours in 1 month. If you went to Michael Porter from Harvard his pestle indicators, and you looked at those, they stand for political, economic, social, technical, legal, and environmental. And you broke each one of those down, and then you did the research of how political, economic, legal impact the business leaders in your environment. And you took that approach. Within 30 days, you should be able to talk at a consultative level to any business leader about what their colleagues and their peers are doing, and therefore they should listen to you. There's another book that I read from Jonah Berger. He talked about invisible influence, and he states that 99% of humans make decisions based on others' opinions. So if we look at those two scenarios and we simply understand as a 1%er salesperson, if we look at the 1% customers in our industry and understand the pestle indicators that they're using, and simply talk to the 99% about what the 1%ers are doing politically, environmentally, socially, technically, legally, and economically, we can begin to have those business level conversations.
I love it. I love all these frameworks. It makes it all so much easier to comprehend and to put together. So I think we've got some work on our side to build some resources into this episode's show notes. And with that, Joe, I've got one final question, mate. Something to ask everyone that comes on the show, and that is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
Think more of myself. Focus more on teaching customers how to improve their business results. Stop worrying about being liked. Stop talking about the relationship all the time. Look, we all have to have great relationships. We all have to be good people. It's not just salespeople. It's everyone in the professional environment. That is not the differentiator. The differentiator, the 1%er, is that business leader, and here it goes, the one that can motivate the customer to reach for new grounds, to do better. We have to be motivators and business leaders. So it took me too long to learn that. And the last part of it is go around catching people doing something right. Right? Use Stephen Covey. If you're talking to a customer and you want to suggest they improve something, build on what you see that they're doing right. Don't focus on catching them doing something wrong. So you can say, listen, you're running a world-class organization here. I love this product. I believe, though, by making this change to the light source or to the lens source, you can win a new market. And I want to see you do that. I really want to see you win more business and penetrate new markets. So be motivational, catch people doing something right, and focus on the business result that you can bring for your customers.
Good stuff. What a way to wrap up the show. Well, with that, Joe, tell us a little bit where we can find out more about you, mate, the book, and anything else you want to share with the audience as well.
Sure. So the book is called The Smart Sales Methods. It's on Amazon, so you can find it on Amazon. You can find me on LinkedIn. And on the back of the book is my phone number and my text. Reach out. I love to talk. I love to learn. It's how I do research. And you can go to my company website, www.worldleadersales.com. 2 S's in the middle.
Good stuff. Well, I'll link to all that in the show notes to this episode over at salesman.org. And with that, Joe, I want to thank you for your time, your insights, which are unique on this, which I appreciate. There's clearly a lot of hard work that's gone into the frameworks and everything else that goes along with that, so I appreciate it. And I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Will, it's been a highlight. It's been my honor. Thanks so much for having me here. Let's do it again.